Today we're going to show you how to change the volume spacer in your Fox Air shock. This is to give you either more or less progressivity. If your sag is correct but you're bottoming out too often, you might want to add a bigger volume spacer. Conversely, if your sag is correct but you're never really using full travel and it feels harsh over bigger bumps, you might want to add a smaller volume spacer. First thing is to make sure the shock and the frame are clean so that no dirt falls into the air can while you're taking it apart. The next thing you want to do is just make a note of the pressure that's in the shock before you start by installing a shock pump. And if you want to be super accurate, you can then take it off, put it back on, and see how much pressure you've lost, and then add that on to what you had before. So we're at 126 to start with, 121 when we went the second time, so we know we were at about 129 to start with. So that's what we want to aim for when we come to refit the shock to the bike. Then we want to take the shock pump back off. And the most important step of all is to remove all the air from the shock using an Allen key. Just press that into the valve. Make sure all the air is out. So if your shock is orientated so that the head of the shock is higher than the other end of the shock, it is possible to remove the air can without taking the shock out of the bike. To do this, you can do it by hand by just gripping the air sleeve and just twisting it anti-clockwise. Keep going until it comes all the way off like that. As you get towards the end of the thread, be aware that the pressure in the negative spring will want to force the air can towards the hardware at the other end of the shock. So make sure to support the air can to stop it flying off and hitting that hardware too hard. So there's a small rubber O-ring which you want to carefully move down, and a metal disc that slides down too, and the spacer is inside here. Find the notch in the volume spacer and just gently lever that out with an Allen key, and it should just snap out. Just note the orientation of the volume spacer. The concave side sits towards the bottom of the shock, and the flat side sits in at the top. Now I'm going to install a smaller volume spacer into the shock, which doesn't have an orientation. When it's time to fit your new volume spacer, simply slide it over the damper shaft and snap it into place at the head of the shock. The next thing is to slide your metal washer and carefully your rubber O-ring back into position. The next thing is to slide the air can towards the head of the shock. Then there'll be some resistance, but wait for the air pressure to equalize, and it should be quite easy to push the air can towards the head of the shock and then rotate it clockwise to thread it into place. Now there's no torque setting on this air can, but if you just twist it until the logos are aligned as they were before, nice and straight, you're all good. All that remains is to pump the shock back up to the pressure you had it before. So I've put a bit more pressure in than before, but when I take the bike off the stand and cycle the shock, the air pressure will move into the negative spring and the air pressure will drop. Then we just need to take the bike out of the stand. Have a sit on the saddle and cycle the shock through the first part of the travel. You should feel and hear the air moving into the negative spring, and as a result the pressure in the shock pump drops. Then all we have to do is fine tune the pressure to what we had before, which in this case was 129 psi. Then all we have to do is take the shock pump back off and remember to put the dust cap back on the valve. After doing this, it's well worth rechecking your sag, and then when you hit the trails, use the O-ring to see how much travel you've used. If you're bottoming out too much now, you might want to fit a bigger volume spacer, and if you're not using full travel and you want the suspension to feel softer over bigger bumps, you might want to fit a smaller volume spacer.